looking so serious and attentive and taking it, reading thoughtfully. It looks like a lot of people are really looking at this very seriously. Yeah. So this is the open-ended or open structure conversation process. Yeah. If anybody who wants to talk, we'll see if Brian, if you can just bring over the audio recording. Like I said, we're going to try to share publicly these.
Sure.
Just wait. He's got a little mic that's going to go into the audio recording. This is going to the public. This will be publicly available for others, what you say here, so fair warning. Well, your name is not identified, but like...
Yes. My question is, as somebody who works with growers who shape the quality of the food that you're testing with this whole process, I can see the value of the results that the meter and changing public opinion and being a force for change and a market determining step. My question revolves around how do we change the paradigm at the farmer's end of the equation in terms of understanding the soil health metrics that produce the more nutrient-dense food.
Yeah.
So I see at the moment, from your presentation, there's measurement of respiration, and is there a possibility to link it back to microbiome, genetic sequencing, categorising the biology that's creating this change for more nutrient-dense food? Because
yes.
As a practitioner in the advising farmer end of the scale, it'd be great to have a soil health metric. And I know that's a much talked about and hard to define
yes.
term.
Yeah.
And, research institutions in Australia are struggling with how to come up with these.
I think I've got your question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is exactly what we want you to engage, is a set of suggestions. So what are the metrics that you think should be included? Which labs, there's obviously money is a limiting factor. It's critically important that we not only identify what is relatively good or what is and less so, but what causes it. And so, there's a whole process. What we are actively looking for is people who think they have suggestions about the ways we can measure these things or which things we should prioritize assessing, that you actually submit those suggestions formally through the process that can then be integrated into the final draft. So categorically, absolutely, yes, we need to assess these causal dynamics. The foundational expectation is that every piece of metadata that's collected will be publicly available to everybody on the planet. Who you are as a farm, what your name is, where you live is not public information, right? You're identifying metrics are not public, but all the metadata about your operation is public. So we can have that as a baseline for having all farmers able to see which practices, which products, which genetics, which correlate with what results. That's foundational to it, and which things we need to be assessing or need to be prioritizing assessing is exactly what we're wanting you to make suggestions about. I don't know if I said this clearly. I'll say it now. Bionutrientinstitute.org/treaty is the URL where this is operating from. There is a form on there which is exactly designed for this. You say, this is who I am, this is, so I would just, one step at a time. There's a form there for anybody who wants to make suggestions to make suggestions. And anything that is suggested will be made available for everyone else to review. This whole concept, we're calling it a treaty. I think it's a good name for the concept. A treaty, like somebody drafts a treaty, like in international relations. There's a treaty on chemical weapons, right? There's a treaty is drafted. There's a negotiating process where all of the countries debate about what the final text of that treaty should be. It takes a while. It goes back and forth. Finally, a final draft is settled upon, and then a bunch of countries sign it, and some countries don't. Right? So we're in this process right now of saying, here's a draft. You are an autonomous entity. You maybe have your name Anthony, or maybe you are representing this company, and your company can say, we make this suggestion. We want to hear your proposals. We want to put that to everyone else to review and consider. Depending on what the consensus is, that will be in the final treaty or not. And then that's what's signed up, and then that's how we proceed forward. So that's exactly the process we're hoping to engage. The other aspect is, has anybody heard of this thing called FOMO? FOMO, right? So the fear of missing out, for those who don't know. It seems like humans have this dynamic where if a bunch of people are doing it, they want to jump on the bandwagon. So we're hoping to use that in this process. And for any of you who want to say publicly, I am who I am, we are this company, we are this organization, etc. We put our names on this. There's two phases. One phase is, I, this person, we, this company, support this process. Right now we're in the treaty negotiation process, so you can publicly say, we support this process. And then the second thing is, we sign the treaty. And that happens after the end of November, which is when we're proposing to have this thing done. So if you want to be associated with this and be able to have us put out on social and everything else, look at all these famous people and cool thought leaders, etc., who are taking part in this project, please feel free. And then if the final version is one that you don't like, don't sign it. Or if you do, then you sign it. And the more people, the more companies, the more organizations that sign it, the real issue here is raise tens of millions of dollars to accomplish a world-changing endeavor that no one can profit off of. Like, we need to raise lots of money that is only going to give you, karma in response. There's no ROI, there's no IP, there's no ability to make monetary profit off of supporting this project economically. So how do we make it seem cool for the people that do have money to support it? Our thought is, by having people who have reputation, honor, integrity, thought leadership, like the more diverse, the broader the diversity of the ecosystem who say, we support this with our name, with our reputation, with our honor, then we can go to the philanthropists, then we can go to the foundations, the other charitable institutions and say, look who signed on to this. That should give you enough reason to say we're going to support it as well. So hope that answers your question. Gives me an opportunity to say a couple things I didn't say before.
Just following that question on how to educate farmers and give them the tools to improve their microbiology and their nutrient density, will it work to the other end of the scale of what inputs are obviously affecting the nutrient density in terms of, pesticides have the ability to kill microbiome in soil? So will it cover both sides, so the positive impacts but also the negative impacts, so that people can actually take from both sides?
The objective is to, and this is an important piece of the puzzle, because cash is limited and complex metabolomic assessments are expensive, we have to be strategic about how many samples we bring in from where. And so we need to, this is part of, again, the negotiation process, is to collectively identify what are the metrics by which we're going to discern which samples to bring in. We really want to find not the middle, we want to find the worst and the best. We want to identify the spectrum of variation, but what is 100? What's the best possible carrot? Like, I'm sure there's people doing really good job with carrots, but they're probably not operating on scale, right? They're probably operating in really diverse polycultural, dynamics. And how do we identify those proactively and make sure we get those samples so we can have a realistic identification of where the top end is? And we certainly want to be getting a bunch of stuff from the bottom end. And one of the rules is, if we're going to run your sample, we need to know everything about it. What was your entire fertility program? What was your entire management program? What's the genetics? What's the soil type? What's the climate dynamics? So presumably that's going to show us these are the things that were causal in bad stuff. These were the things that were causable and good stuff. And my thought is, the opportunity here is for people in the supply chain who are selling products. If your stuff is good, you're going to get more business. And if your stuff is bad, you're going to lose business, right? This is the whole thing. Is the market is a powerful thing, and governments have their fingers on the scale, and there's all kinds of other ways in which truth is perverted. But if we actually have an open data framework where we can see what caused what results, farmers who want to get the best results can trust this. They don't have to be concerned about, well, this person's a salesman, so they actually have an agenda to sell me something. I really like them and I want to trust them, but is it the best thing out there? If you can see from your ecosystem, like, this is what the protocol was that caused the best result in your continent, you're probably going to want to try that on at least one of your blocks. So yeah, I think that answers your question. Yes? There's people around too. You're going to have to move around the room. These guys are waiting politely on this side. Yeah.
Apologies for being late. First of all, thank you. Great stuff. Item 7 on your theory of change: consumers will choose higher quality. That's what we were saying in the 1970s, the Denver Bakery in Sydney.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen. My experience is that it's only illness that drives change.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's just every year that goes on, there's actually more people waking up. So
based on illness, I completely agree with you.
Anyway, that's aside. In terms of an additional measurement,
Yes.
back in the 80s, we studied the work of a Dr. Pop.
Fritz Albert Pop, biophotonics.
Yeah. So in terms of light emissions,
Yes.
is that in your spectrum of measurement?
So coherence is really what I want. I really want a coherence meter, not a nutrient meter. The grand vision is we're looking at the overall vibrational coherence of the thing. And if you look at biochemistry, you can say, like, this carrot is biochemically really quite nice, but you had to irradiate it as part of your food safety protocol. And what happened to the vibrational harmonics of the water in 10 octaves after it got irradiated is that got destroyed. So it may have the same biochemistry, but from a vibrational standpoint, it's nothing resembling what it was when it got harvested. That is the end game I'm aiming at. I'm just presuming to hide behind the physical plane right now. This is the strategy. It's like we're just dealing with the fact that this is what's considered to be legitimate right now is biochemistry, not consciousness.
Well,
Yeah.
So the other thing to pay attention to in the feedback we get from the wine industry, for instance, when we talk about sugars, they actually say it's not about sweetness, it's a quality of ripeness. And so there's the whole spectrum
Yeah.
that is in my view, in addition to what you're doing. So I'm not criticising what you're doing, it's the next levels that I think, and if we could do what you're doing, let's say 1 in 100, 5 in 100, we actually do like chromatography models of crystallization
Yep.
on a number of them, so we get a spectrum
Yep.
to build a future.
I think that's a great idea. I would welcome you going through the formal process and writing it down. Hopefully we've got it captured on the audio so we can take notes as well. But absolutely. Taking a subset and doing a complete set of assessments, which really are as far off the edge as possible, would be great. Sensitive chromatography is, I think a really, really valuable frame.
Just with the chromatography, back in the 80s, one of our wheat suppliers rang us at harvest time and said that he ran out of seed wheat, so he bought pickled wheat, Linday now, and he mixed 20% of that with 80% of his own wheat. He sowed it, and he rang us at harvest time and said, what do you do? So we said, keep it separate, but with the capillary models, we can find the Linday in the harvested sample.
Yeah.
From wheat, only 20% of the seed wheat had been pickled.
Yeah.
So there are very fine measurements that can be.
I truly believe, I think if you talk to the physicists, they'll tell you that 95% of reality is not in the physical plane, right? This physical plane thing we talk about, like matter and, nutrients and bodies and stuff like that, physical senses, sound and taste, That's 5% of reality. 95% of reality is on some other set of octaves. And so for me, that is a foundational understanding, and I truly believe that is where the real truth resides, is on those subtler planes. But there's a balancing act, which is dealing with governmental agencies and back of pack labels and, that. And so, yeah, my end game is, much along the lines of where you're targeting at, but strategically we've chosen to find this as our place to engage. Thank you for your engagement, and thank you for coming.
Hi, thank you for that. I really respect what you're doing. Generally speaking, in the nutrition world, there's this tendency to classify good and bad and focus on single nutrients.
Yes.
Which I know you're aiming higher than that, but this is still very focused on single nutrients.
This
Yes.
is not focused on single nutrients.
What you showed us, for example,
Was our preliminary work. That was our preliminary work. What I said at the beginning was, this was our original work we started in 2017 to answer some basic questions, which was, what is the scale of variation? Once we identified that was a dramatic variation, the work we're doing now with nutrient density is trying to find the biomarkers that correlate with overall system function. So we're not focusing on individual nutrients.
So how are you going to, from a consumer point of view, how are you going to display that to the consumer and kind of avoid the situation where some vegetables are dead and might as well not eat them, whereas some are good?
The idea is, at the end of this whole process of definition, we have a series of biomarkers. And I said in beef, it looks like it'll be 2 elements, 2 vitamins, 2 fatty acids, and 2 secondary metabolites at certain levels and ratios that correlate with 20 out of 100, 40 out of 100, 60 out of 100, 80 out of 100. That's based on looking at the whole microbiome, the metabolome, the soil health, and the functional human health response. The primary definition of what we think is quality is when a human eats that whole food, what's the relative level of positive or negative response? Everything that's happening with agronomy is like, okay, it's helpful for the farmers to know what caused it, but our definition of quality, we think, is you eat this carrot, how does your body respond? You eat that carrot, how does your body respond? What's the definition of like the best possible response and the worst possible response? So we're not looking at individual nutrients, we're trying to find a series of biomarkers which correlate with that bodily response. Our thought is that is perceived by the consumer as a number on their screen after flashing a light somewhere between 1 and 100. Now, yeah, we had a few nutritionists at our event 2 days ago down outside of Melbourne, and this was a critical question, was like, how do we make sure people don't stop eating fruits and vegetables and instead start eating candy and stuff like that. We want people to eat fruits and vegetables. We don't want them to eat candy. And I say that is not food, that's junk. So that's out of it shouldn't even be in the conversation. Processed products, I say we should call junk. And I'm not sure in American English, you guys don't speak American English down here, you speak Australian. But we have this thing in American English, there's this term, which is junk food. Have you heard the term?
Yes.
Right. I propose that is like saying, my dog is alive dead, or that chicken is wet dry, or the time of day is night day. Like, there's junk and there's food. We need to actually take back the rhetoric and understand and say, I think they call it ultra-processed now food, but they still call it food. Maybe ultra-processed product, if you don't want to be so pejorative. But I think the nutritionist world is a little bit afraid of the consumer packaged goods industry and is trying to give respect to things which should not be respected. And in fact, what we have evolved to eat is what we have evolved to eat, and what is on the shelf is not what we have evolved to eat, and in many cases has detrimental impact. So maybe I'm a bit strident, but I think from a different way of framing it is, children are animals. They have evolved sophisticated nutrient monitoring systems called noses and tongues. The reason children don't eat their fruits and vegetables is because they don't taste good. And because they, as animals, know they're not good for them. And if you simply gave them carrots that would taste good, they would fight over them. And as long as you give them carrots that don't taste good, they will throw them away. And so we need to actually stand on food and say it's our responsibility as farmers, as the agricultural community, to be providing high quality food as an option, which effectively, as you saw in these graphs, is not. The option of high quality food at point of purchase effectively doesn't exist. 2%, maybe 5% of the supply chain is somewhere in that top 40th percentile of what's possible, which is what we are evolved to eat. And so, yeah, I'm really happy to have a deeper conversation with the nutrition community. This is where the point about whether we should call it nutrient density in the first place comes from. I just have had some really great conversations with people from the American Academy of Dietitians or Dietetics. They've got 60,000 members, dietitians in the US, and they're like, we love what you're doing. We completely want to work with you. And if you call it nutrient density, we won't. Because nutrient density already means something to us. It is a term that already has a definition in food science. And just because us, scrappy food movement people are using the term, doesn't mean it doesn't already mean something to them. In the same way that my parents and their, generation co-opted this term organic, which already meant something to chemists. Organic meant contains carbon. Still means contains carbon, still pisses off the chemists that all these people are using the term organic to mean something which is not organic, right? There's still this visceral gut, what happened? It used to be our word, now it's not. So I'm completely open to this conversation about what should we call this. And it comes from the nutritionist community, and it's because I really want them on board and on side. But I think, the woman on Wednesday was saying well, it's about communications and marketing, and we want to make sure we have a common language and we've got our pitch right. And I'm like, you can pitch and market all you want. My experience is when stuff doesn't taste good, people don't eat it. And when it does taste good, people do. And that's the thing that we don't actually have happening. And we're not saying these carrots are bad. We're saying they're not as good as these carrots. These carrots are certainly better than a candy bar. All carrots are better than candy bars. That should be a foundational understanding. If you want your kids to want carrots, you have to understand that they're animals. They have evolved with sophisticated nutrient monitoring systems. What you're providing them is insufficient, and that's the foundational issue. So I hope that's a response at least. I look forward to more engagement. I hope, yes.
I just wanted to ask sort of how well do you think you'll be able to incorporate potential diversity and variation? You can have two different carrots that are very different spectral readings, but are both highly nutritious, say. So how well can you incorporate and integrate different definitions of nutrient density? I imagine to some extent you're never going to get a highly zinc deficient carrot that's really high in polyphenols because it doesn't have everything it needs to grow really well. But there's going to be variation. Can you speak to that?
Sure. And each each variety has its own preponderance or capacity to isolate and concentrate different compounds. And so how do we honestly, with using the Western rational empirical method to come up with a gradation? This is the question. No one's done it before. And we're trying to do it as honestly and openly and categorically as possible, bringing the best scientists to the table.
And I think that's really commendable that you've had the whole treaty process to really include as much feedback as you can.
We're just starting it.
Yeah.
It does look like those things that we evolved to discern, which is flavor and aroma, which is not sugar, right? Sweet is not flavor. For everybody, just so we're really, really clear, sweet is not flavor. Flavor is flavor. Like the carroty flavor is what we're talking about, not the sweetness of the carrot. It looks like it's the flavor that is the thing that correlates with the overall nutritional sophistication. And so there are different flavors, like with grapes, there's different flavors, with apples, there's different flavors, with, cucumbers, there's different flavors, or whatever it is. But if we had a hypothesis, it would look like the intensity of the flavor, the strength of the flavor. Think about an herb. Ever gotten basil from the grocery store that was grown hydroponically and you could squish the living daylights out of it and not smell basil, or just get the smallest little whiff? And you've had basil from the garden that you look at it wrong and you get almost a headache because it's so intense. You know what I'm talking about? Right? It's that intensity of the aromatic flavor compounds that, if I had to make a hypothesis, if I had to bet right now, what are we going to come up with? That's going to be the thing. And each variety has different compounds per se, but it's like some total or quantity that I think is going to be the thing that comes out. So
you have a diverse sort of system for there's going to be different things that are going to add to the total score. Is it like an average? So you've got all your nutrients and you've got the critical values, you've got good values, low values, average values. And is it like an average of each of those nutrients?
I don't know.
You
It's called original research.
Yeah.
People know what original research means? As a pure science, what original research basically means, you go into the process with a complete, honest statement, which is, I don't know, and you let the data guide you. This is why we have statistics. This is why we have statisticians. This is why we have algorithms I'm glad I never took statistics, because my brain does not work that way, but some people's brains do. And so when you collect a bunch of metadata and you feed it into statistical models and look for patterns, this is why we bring in those people who are credentialed in these skills to make sure that it's done in that way. And I think I said here in this document, our definition of success is a baseline that hopefully inspires others to go more deep, right? We don't think this is going to be the be-all and end-all. We think this is a first solid stake in the ground that is really worthy of, serious intellectual engagement, and hopefully will inspire major investment from government level research. We're talking about $1.25 million per crop to do all this stuff per crop. That's nothing. That's absolutely nothing for anybody who knows how much research costs. You could easily spend 50 million or 200 million or $1 billion per crop to really tease this stuff out. And that's what we hope is inspired by this process. We hope that our definition that we arrive at initially is enough to get people who want to make money selling meters to start making meters, to get this process stimulated. But then it begins to iterate over time, and we have more and more nuanced definitions over time. So yeah, this is, as the biodynamic community would say, it's a process, right? We're not trying to arrive at a conclusion. We're trying to stimulate a process that will, turn into something more meaningful. Short answer, I don't know.
Thanks so much for your presentation.
Yeah.
I'm actually involved with a project at the moment with farmers all around Australia, and what we've found is that there's a lot of interest for farmers in Australia to know their nutritional value.
Yeah.
One of the lacking was actually good scientific or
Baselines.
for nutrition.
Yeah.
So it sort of was put aside a little bit. So I'd like to talk to you further about maybe speaking to the university and how it could be involved. There's laboratories at the university as well. So I think it'd be something really
Love to.
good
Yeah.
because we know that there's farmers all over Australia that are wanting to get a good foundational baseline to understand nutritional density.
Yeah.
Or what
whatever we end up calling it.
So
I like to say quality, but people get pissed at me when I say quality because quality means something different, right? Yeah.
Thanks for doing all the work as well.
Yes, and this is exactly what we hope to inspire. It sure looks like there's a bunch of people who are wanting to engage, and if we can just say, how about we create a framework where everybody's welcome to take part and nobody's, top down trying to control it, but we're actually trying to figure this out together. And there is a lot of money out there, starting to pop up and show up and engage this. And a lot of farmers are willing to put money on the table to get readings. A lot already are. They're getting numbers back that mean gibberish, right? Like, okay, I spent $5,000 or $10,000 on a bunch of beef samples, and I get all these numbers back. And what about this? Like, nothing, because you have no context. Until you have context for your numbers, it doesn't mean anything. All those numbers are irrelevant. Getting feedback. Yeah, so absolutely. I will say Sarah back there in the dress with colors, the colorful dress, she is our development director. So whatever a development director means, among other things, it's like money and partnerships and stuff like that. Her email is on the other side of this. It's sarah@bionutrient.org. She's traveling with me around the world as part of this process, but definitely give your contact information to her, talk to her, everybody else. Okay. Look at that. So yes, I would like to acknowledge her. I haven't already. I'm sorry, Sarah, but yeah. So this is a team effort, and we want your feedback. And also, if you've got connections that can help to facilitate the cash, nothing's going to move without the cash. I say we collectively come up with a plan first, and then we collectively sign on to it as people who have, want to say this is something I support. But then foundationally, until we get the cash raised, nothing's happening. So, yeah.
Charlie from Burwa, thank you for gathering the kind of minds here today. My thoughts are getting back to the eaters end of the process. Do we know, it's a question of the statement, do we know how educated, I'm not the right word, but how demanding they are or will be for knowing nutrient density?
Who? Educators?
No, so people eating the food, going shopping, is that going to move the dial in terms of demand? People going, oh, it's nutrient density, that's better for me. Are they thinking about what's better for me, or are they thinking more about price? Because that's where they're coming from. And back to one of the previous comments about terminology and how we say or how we describe this concept. Maybe it's not so much nutrient density but flavour intensity. Maybe more of a
term. Yeah.
For the consumers in, because that's what they buy food on. Would you hope they appreciate these things about flavour and taste and that sort of thing? It might be more interesting than nutrient density because a lot of people who don't.
It's a much more visceral thing.
Yeah, that's right. They're not buying
Not a bad point.
on is that good for me?
Yeah.
They're buying on price or convenience or some whole other things. So the success of this is going to be predicated on the fact that people want to then make a decision based on the number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a couple points. Very good. Thank you. I've been engaging with a lot of very large corporates recently who are, it's so interesting the inbound that comes to my inbox of people like in places of significant capacity in corporations which are quite large who were like, I've been following your work for 3 years. I've been following your work for 5 years. I'm like, oh, Jesus. Anyway, and they're like, we've been doing our market research and our consumers want flavor, price, and nutrition in almost equal quantities. It's about 80% when they ask, of the 85 things that they can choose, like it's 26, and 25% out of 100 are flavor, price, and nutrition. And so if flavor and nutrition are the same thing, and price, what I understand, what got me into this whole thing as a farmer in the first place was I was able to get my cost of production down and be in a place where I'm making my living working 20 hours a week farming because I was doing some rudimentary level of what indigenous cultures did, which was basically create a dynamic where nature does the work. And so I would argue that high quality food need not be more expensive, that actually cost of production should decrease based on biological system function. And so we should be able to outcompete the chemistry food on price, on cost of production, if we're really truly working with nature. So yeah, I think that's a really important piece of the deeper conversation. I don't think that everybody in the world, as soon as there's a nutrient density definition or a flavor intensity definition out there, is going to be making decisions accordingly. But there does seem to be a trajectory of the early adopters. This is what they're looking for, and what the early adopters are doing now is what the first 10% is going to be doing in 3 years, and then the next 25% is going to be doing in 5 years. And we can see this has happened from the organic movement over the past 40 years, and the corporates know it. Like wherever the early adopters are now is where the vast majority of the market's going to be in 20 years or 15 years or 10 years. And I'll say, I don't think health is such a critical issue here in Australia as it is in the US. You can look to us as leaders in many fronts, like how not to do stuff, but one of them is like health. And what's going on right now in the US is Graham was talking about this when we were on stage together. He was in, where was it, in Washington State or last fall, our fall, your spring. You walked into Walmart and was sort of just, I'm not sure what words you used, but they were like absolutely deeply disturbed. Zombie Holocaust. Deeply disturbed by looking at the humans. Like the nature of health status in the US is not anything to be proud of. And what happens is, and for me, I think this is a very visceral driver, a lot of people have children, and when you have a child, if anybody's ever had a child, like all of a sudden something happens and like that becomes an extraordinarily important thing for you to do, is to take as best care as possible for that child. And people, that's like the gateway drug to organic, is having children. People begin to buy organic for their children. They still continue to eat not organic for themselves, begin to buy organic and everything for their children, and that's what transforms the whole kitchen cabinet. And what's going on is a lot of people's kids are not well. And so I think that's the visceral driver that's going to move this whole thing, is that pain, that visceral suffering of pain. But the pleasure pain principle, like when your kids are sick, you'll basically move heaven and earth to do something about it. And if you can do something like have an app on your phone which says, I'm going to buy carrots. If you know you're going to buy carrots and you just choose the best one, I'm going to buy beef, choose the best. I'm going to buy milk, choose the best. Like if it's that simple of an effort, I'm already at the store. I'm already going to be spending money. Now I have a way of knowing that is beyond the marketing and the labeling, which I don't trust because of the sophistication of the propaganda industry. My supposition is, and my experience has been when I've talked to people about this for years, like when I say, hey, we're going to have a little gizmo, they're like, I want one. So maybe they're just excited in the moment, but I do think this is the kind of thing that if we can accomplish it, will have a very powerful effect. But I guess that's the open question. If we do spend the money, if we do go through the work, if we do inspire companies to make meters, will that shift the market or not? I would say what my experience has been recently in the past like less than 2 years has been a lot of big corporates are coming and saying, we see where this is going and we want to be having our supply chain transformed before the meter comes out. It's literally like a head fake. We're like, hey, we're going this way. Like, oh shit. Like, they're psyched out by the fact that we're talking about it seriously. Like the proposition that we do come together and actually fully and openly and gently over time engage this process gives them enough time to shift their supply chains to actually functionally increase market, percent. right? It's all about market. It's all about your quarterly profits for these big corporates. And if we can say, and this is the dynamic, it's actually the dynamic is in many cases the fruits and vegetables at Whole Foods are not as good as the fruits and vegetables at Walmart. If people could know that, that's going to have an impact on Walmart, it's going to have an impact on Whole Foods. Our hope is to inspire competition to the top, to inspire, industry to focus on doing as good a job as possible as opposed to as bad a job as possible, which seems to be in many cases how the standards are set up right now. So can't predict how it's going to happen, but I would say those are some of the vectors in my experiences. I will say also, I love the Q&A, I love the questions. I also am really looking for suggestions. So this happened at our meeting on Thursday. The first hour was like Q&A and it was great fun. Like the first hour was me talking, second hour was Q&A. But where it got really juicy was like, you haven't thought about this. This is stupid. How about this? Change that. That's what we're really looking for. This is not a listening happening this right now. This is Q&A. This is so happy to keep doing Q&A, but if you've got suggestions, or you don't want to offer them now, but you want to offer them later, that's what we're looking for. To improve the vision, the plan, the strategy. That's what we want. Yes?
Just to reinforce what you said about the Australian
Oh,
situation.
you don't have the mic.
Got one question here.
Sorry. You can't talk until you've got the magic talking stick. She's got the talking stick.
It seems like an old moment when we handed the teaspoon.
The talking teaspoon.
Maybe it seems to be somewhat short, but in line with some of the more technical questions, having measured this, have you doing that? What's curiosity about the experimental design as part of engaging with the larger process? So people are going to want to access that. What is the best way for people, either from statistics or from nutrition or from whatever lens it is, to have a look at the experimental design and sort of scratch that itch, so to speak, or answer those questions or provide feedback? What's the best way to do that as part of engaging with the treatment process?
Yeah.
And then I have another question.
Let me answer that first, then you can have the second part.
Also not problem.
No. I'm totally happy to have you have a second question. So if you look, there's the treaty, which is the first series of pages, and then there's the addenda, which is the next few pages. And I think experimental design is one of them. So we're in the process of fleshing this out. From what we have done before, as here's our baseline, here's our lab, we think we can get a really good price point for a bunch of nutrients, and if you can get a better price, great. It's in the addenda is where that would be. The process online is you go to the website, you open up the form, which is the suggestions form, and you put in your suggestions. What would be even better is I am somewhat credentialed or knowledgeable in this space. I'm a nutritionist, I'm an agronomist. I would like to be part of a committee of people who's going to put 10, 20, 50, 200 hours into this process over the next 3-4 months. If there are people who actually are passionate and want to step in and have the knowledge base to seriously engage and are not, I'll just say, we're serious, solid, humble interlocutors. That's manna from heaven. Anybody here who says this is important and I want to help, or I know people who you should have involved who could help. We are not specialists in everything. We are a small organization. We are looking for those people who do have those skills, who have that capacity, who want to help and to engage in that broad way. That's the way success happens, is through that bottom-up, decentralized, self-organizing process. So thank you for that. That's extremely important. Yeah. We all have skills. Some of them are organizing. Some of them are communications. Some is fundraising. If you've got a skill, if you've got a capacity, it's not necessarily as a scientific aspect, but I can do this or I can help out. Anybody who wants to step in, please, if you don't want to do it online, talk to Sarah, say, here's my name, talk to me later. Here's somebody I think you should talk to. Yeah, your second question.
Sorry. The other question was in the guiding principles, and it's good to play on my mind as we are measuring nutrient density from the perspective of human health and using that as the metric, then what we measure gets managed
Yeah.
Like, it's a whole other question, but how does that fit with the nature?
Well, as I said initially with our preliminary data, it sure looks like the things that connect to human health are the things that connect to ecosystem function, the things that connect to farm viability, that connect to animal welfare. It sure looks like nature figured this thing out a really long time ago. And all these different things, pest and disease resistance, cost of production, soil health, flavor, shelf life, human health, are different facets of the same gemstone of health, of life, of vitality, of coherence, of love, whatever you want to call it. That's the thesis, is that these things are all actually intrinsically interrelated. But I think if we could simply shift the food supply chain to focus on optimizing health as opposed to optimizing volume and profit, that in and of itself will be massive. And all the metadata we've got, all the circumstantial evidence we've got, sure seems to point towards the only way to get that optimal caliber of health is through a deep and harmonious relationship with nature. So.
What we're measuring in present is soil. Soil's having its glory day, which is great. I wonder
If you're talking, you have to hold the spoon.
Sorry. So soil is like, you know, the big thing. It's brilliant. So, worthwhile is going when we're maximising soil for cable. Do you know what I mean? Like, so the question is, we love soil at the moment. Every soil comes with how does that larger dynamic of nature remain in the system?
It sure looks like.
I don't think this metric, but it might be the correct.
Well, it's an important point, critically important. It looks like the more diverse the ecosystem, the more diverse the microbiome, the better the resiliency and system function. So it looks like monocultures are negatively incentivized if you really look deeply into this whole system. Has anybody heard of, obviously we know about what's being done with Malone Institute and the water cycle and all that kind of stuff. Has anybody heard of, what's it called, the biotic pump? The biotic pump, there's a woman, Anastasia Marakievna, she's a Russian woman who's, they've been doing some brilliant physics looking at trees and forests and how they bring rain. And if you actually want climate resilience, you need these intact, forest ecosystems to facilitate the process of hydration. If climate's a concern, which, this continent maybe is a little bit more averse to that, which is probably why you've got so many brilliant people in the agronomic world, is because your whole system is so tenuous, right? Like, it sure looks like those ecosystems where you have the endemic species of the climax forest type, with then obviously all of their mammals and other animals operational, is the only way to have climate resilience. So it sure looks like it's all connected. But yeah, we can only do what each of us can do. So I'm extremely optimistic about how all these things fit together and what seems to be coming together in that deeper sets of insights and understandings. And the pleasure pain principle, right? As long as we're comfortable and we're complacent, sometimes only when you start to suffer a little bit are you willing to change your ways. So, yeah.
We've got about 5 people with questions. How long do you want to give to this segment? Do you want to keep going?
This is it. This is the whole agenda. Theoretically, we stop at 2. So what time is it?
10 past 12 now.
1. Theoretically, we stop at 1. Sorry. Yes. 10 to 1. 3 hours was scheduled for this. So we have 50 minutes left. Happy to keep engaging questions. Again, suggestions is really the what we want to be looking towards. This man in the front, we'll get him at some point soon, hopefully. Yes.
Dan, Kenneth here. My suggestion, so it's not a question, is based on 2 prior international studies which we've done, which follow the same premise as you're doing, in that it involves an instrument which collects data at a point in a process and produces data and insights in an attempt to change consumer behavior. So you're talking about a massive organizational change management exercise. The first study was around food provenance and whether consumers would buy food if they knew the origins of that food. The second study, which was global, was would people pay more or select differently if they knew the carbon footprint of the product that they were eating?
Yeah.
So they're both values-based, a bit like yours, it's values-based.
I wouldn't say this is values-based quite so much, but okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, it is in that if your price is your value, and you're living in a food desert, nutrition is irrelevant because you've got 5 minutes to feed your kid. You don't have time to worry about nutrition, you just grab the first thing that's available. So there is a level of value that maybe sits outside of this kind of select group.
Yeah.
I'm just stepping away to one point. So my suggestion to you is, in terms of your theory of change, maybe split it into audiences, because if you're trying to change people's behavior, you should perhaps reduce, you're not trying to change the world. You're trying to change the manufacturers. You're trying to change businesses' behavior. And then the last thing is you're trying to change consumers' behavior. I don't think you lead with consumer behavior. If we could have, we wouldn't have a climate change problem. Consumers continue to consume plastic. They continue to consume diesel fuel because it's anyways, we'll move on.
Yeah.
So what my suggestion to you is change the theory of change into like an audience 1 and an audience 2, even a phase 1 and phase 2, because you're going to come unstuck in your arguments with people, or your discussions with people, much as like we have today, with people saying, but when you get to the consumer, will they really read, understand, comprehend and process 17 pages of statistical data, or do we dumb it down to a red light, green light, which is what we did with the climate change? You dumbed it down to say, right, this is red light, this is green light, and then immediately you're open to criticism because you've dumbed it down. So I'll leave it at that. It's a suggestion.
Yeah.
And just that theory of change then is the change that you're going to affect in an audience. So like if it's a manufacturer or a beef producer, that they that's what you're trying to change for them, and you're trying to give them full information. And if you're a consumer, and your average consumer, we're a very, very select group of consumers. Hit 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers down the road, and the consumers are markedly different in education, insights, and intent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a suggestion.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I should respond or not, but thank you for the. I've got the mic. Yes. In conversations with a lot of these corporates, I was up in Paris at the, Nestle's got a really big office with a bunch of vice presidents and directors and shit like that in Paris, and I was sitting down with them, sort of sharing this work a few months ago now, and they're like, we've been making all these claims and commitments for climate because we think climate's important, and we've done our market research. Consumers don't care. Anybody heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah. Right? Survival is number 1. The greatest good is the last thing you care about. And so what I would propose is that what we're dealing with right now is survival. It is the survival of my children. It is a visceral driver. And that's what we're, connecting to. And we are working to dumb it down, not to a red light, green light, but to a 1 to 100. We're not trying to provide 17 pages of nuanced biochemistry. The question is, can we honestly create a 1 to 100 scale that is extraordinarily easy to access, which is viscerally connected to survival? And so I hear what you're saying. I feel like we've sort of navigated a space in the middle there, and we're absolutely not working to support the mass audience, which doesn't care right now. What we're working to do is to support the early adopters with a thing that is true. And our hope is a thing that is true will spread, but we can't predict what will happen. It's simply a question, can we do this thing that is true and see what will happen? And yeah, my thought is, this is the kind of insight that a lot of people would like to have. And if, all things being equal, if prices are relatively uniform and people did generally know, I use the example of in the US, we've got I use the Bolthouse Farms and Cal Organic and Bunny Love are 3 brands of carrots. And I just say, if you had those 3 brands on the shelf, and whether you had a meter or not, if 10 people in town had meters and they did the testing and it somehow was there on Instagram or Facebook or whatever your social media platform is, that everybody knew that Bolthouse Farms was better, I'm guessing that people would likely just pull the Bolthouse Farms bag off the shelf and leave the Keller Organic bag on the shelf. That's my hypothesis. And that if that begins to happen, and that it's the fear of that, the threat of that, which is the driver which will incentivize the corporates to make their shifts. I know of companies who have built meters that corporates could use to test stuff on the shelf, and they have successfully gone bankrupt because once the corporates saw what was on their shelf, they realized they had no reason to tell their consumers. And so the people with the money are the ones that actually drive the ship. And so if we can begin to choose where we spend our money, that's our power. Democracy is all well and good, but you vote every 2 years once, right? You vote with your dollar very, very regularly. And that seems to be what actually drives culture dramatically. And so, yeah, well, that's my response. We'll see. It's an open question.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lisa Carneal. I'm actually a large-scale grower in Arizona. And I have to say thanks to GrainSafe. GrainSafe's been a key part of our business.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people go through Grain's course, and I feel strange saying we're an early adopter, because what does that mean, Grain is?
Pioneer.
A pioneer, okay.
Elder on the pantheon.
Whilst we're a large business, we're very focused on mission.
Yeah.
Our mission has been around delivering nutritional food.
Yeah.
We believe the role of the farmer is to deliver nutrition at value to consumers.
Beautiful.
So I think the suggestion is there's a faster path. If you go to the people and the categories that this is already happening in, I believe we've already got the data that allows you to tell the story to get the funding. And we haven't been able to tell our story because a lot of what we produce goes to market unbranded.
Yep.
And that there is a visible difference. I don't need the refractometer to show the difference between our product and other farmers' product. And all the farmers are doing the best they can, working within the current market environment. And unfortunately, growers are working in a competitive environment, and that doesn't make sense. So there's no incentive for me or our farm team to share what they know with others, because we're already at risk of growing less of our nutriently dense product, because customers aren't buying on nutrition at the moment, they're buying on price. So we're actually growing 50% less vegetables than what we were 3 years ago. So that's a lot of nutrients that consumers are actually missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
So the market system is broken.
Yep.
And for anybody that doesn't know, there's an industry survey that went out periodically every 6 months over the last few years. 4 in 5 vegetable farmers want to exit the industry if there was a viable exit. So out of 3,600 vegetable growers in Australia, that's 2,800 want to leave.
Yeah.
A lot of us
Because the system's broken.
The system's broken. So I've got some examples today of the beans. If you wanted to test them after, that would be a real pleasure. And yeah, so we think we can actually spearhead a fast path. Because a lot of groundwork has been laid by the
Yeah.
in the brain and the soul. So don't start on all of those other categories where you're not sure what's going on. Go to the people that absolutely know how they get the results already.
I mean, I've been doing this work after learning from people at Acres almost 20 years ago now, supporting farmers to my rudimentary degree, not like at the scale Graham's doing, others are doing around the world. I have no question about the fact that we absolutely know how to do a way better job in farming than we're doing. The question is not whether we know, the question is whether we have the incentives. And right now, the farmers don't have the incentives to do a better job because the market is not focusing on the quality of the food as the priority. So, yeah, I mean, I think we can predict with pretty good confidence what we're going to find, what the answers are, what the protocols are, what the management practices are, what the products are, right? But the process of science is one where you have to go through the process of science, and you have to actually properly document it, and you engage people, and yeah, I mean, if it was as simple as like, hey guys, we know the answer, it would have already happened. And I'm pretty sure we do know the answer, and it hasn't happened. So then the question is, how do we actually, bring this thing about more broadly? If you are aware of data and stuff that you think we should have, anything that anybody has that they think would simplify the process, any metadata, any preliminary dynamics that, would end up costing us less money to come to these conclusions, please, please, please share, right? The wisdom is in the collective. The wisdom is in the collective, and only when the collective engages do we actually have the opportunity for that symbiosis to occur. So, yeah, I think that's a response. I know Graham wants to speak. I'm not sure we can keep moving in this direction, but yes. Oh, and I'm sorry about the beans. I do not want to do a testing of beans right now. I'm happy to do it later. This does not test nutrient density. We don't have a definition of nutrient density to begin to test. The whole point is there is no definition of nutrient density. This is an instrument which is calibrated to assess a element or compound in this crop, a element or compound in this crop. There is no nutrient density meter because there is no definition of nutrient density. All this is a proof of concept to verify the insight that it is possible to have a nutrient density meter. This is a functioning proof of concept. We've written it all over our website for years. We've said it in all of our podcasts and all of our courses and all of our webinars for years. This is not a nutrient density meter. The reason we stopped making them was because people didn't read the website, they didn't listen to the podcast, they said, I want one, and when they got it, they said, it's not a nutrient density meter. I said, I know, I told you. So we stopped making them because it's called confirmation bias. People want things to be true, whether they're true or not. You want the person you're married to be a nice person. Sometimes they're not, right? You keep trying to believe they are, whatever it is. Like, we want to believe that our government has our best interests at heart, right? Whatever it is, like, if government should do this, like they don't. Stop putting faith in things that don't exist. I mean, that's a whole other rant. I shouldn't go on to it. But the point is, we can't test nutrient density because we don't have a definition for it. And I'd love to test it, but I can't. We have the old-fashioned refractometer. And you said visual. I was talking to my mother this morning, and she was listening to the recording we had at the conference, and she texted me, and she's like, good call, and that's all very interesting you're doing with the science, Dan, but I can see it with my eyes. I can go out into the field, and I can see the radiance on the leaf, and I know things are great. I can see the radiance of the fruit. Yes. We are wired with the best nutrient monitoring systems, which are the bodies we're carrying around, which can perceive on multiple dimensions. This whole thing is a bait and switch. It's a bait and switch to remind us that we actually are wired with the capacity to perceive always have been. There's no better system than the one we're carrying around with us. Right? But there's not even a conversation about it right now, about this fact that there is variation and it can be measured and it can be discerned. Right? That's what we're trying to do, is to stimulate this conversation and coordinate it and facilitate it and build it so that it's such a tsunami that the system of food is transformed. Honorably, bottom up, systemically, openly. So I feel your passion. I really appreciate all your work. And it is hard times for people that are, yeah. The market, I mean, I was just talking, you guys have the duopoly here, right? You got the Coles and the Woolworths. And somebody was saying that they stopped putting labels on bags because people started to choose the stuff that was more flavorful and leave this other stuff on the shelf. I mean, they actively, consciously are preventing people from establishing any pattern forming which will help them choose what's better. I would use a vulgarity at this moment, but I'm in public. Like, yeah, maybe you can intuit what I want to say. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so just covering the issue of, well, my main concern, and I work across the world, of course, is the fact that the most important profession on the planet, without exception, of course, is food producers. And the average age of food producers in the US is 64, here is 63. We can't attract and aren't attracting sufficient people into this industry. And of course, part of that is that no one makes money doing it. And so I was wondering if there's any potential within this model to dovetail a simple certification system that allows people to identify, yes, I've got the certification and we're going to pay a little bit extra or whatever. Secondly, just in terms of that duopoly and the potential for alternatives, one of the most impressive things that I've seen personally is Japan, where they've got this term called kalso, which means putting a paste to your food. There's a chain now of supermarkets controlled by the farmers. They pay the leases, part of their produce, and of course the staff costs, and your table has your food on it. And you have your photo, you have an A5 laminated photo of yourself, your workers, your philosophy, and if you've got one item, you've got a small table, you've got 20 things on a large table, people know who you are and what you're producing, and if you don't produce food with forgotten flavors, extended shelf life, and greater medicinal qualities, people don't come to your tables. It's self-policing, you're out, mate.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a model.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And that simple thing of whether there's a potential to build into this thing, and you know, I see just personally, you've correlated soil life so directly to you producing yourself with one that has simple focus upon even something as simple as the microbiome. I mean, I find traveling across the world that I can walk onto any farm with a microbiometer and say, look, show me your best paddock, show me your worst paddock.
Yeah.
And I'll watch over your shoulder, and people that perhaps never thought of the link to microbes and their profitability,
Yeah.
or plant health or anything, and they're watching and they're reading, and there are no exceptions.
No exceptions.
Block measures 750, the bad block measures 120, block that loses the money, and suddenly it's this massive paradigm shift that all the microbes are making the money. But
Yeah.
that tool, combined with something as simple as a more efficient way of measuring bricks, and combined with something that we've been working with recently, which is a South American concept that I've really done some serious work on in building sugar levels of sugar cane, where you take conventional leaf analysis into the whole series of ratios that have been identified that determine sugar levels. And what you say sugar is not flavour, I mean, it is in a sense.
It's a precursor.
Yeah, of course it is, because you can't make sugar without the minerals that create the chlorophyll density. You've got lots of pale-coloured stripes and so forth, and a lack of chlorophyll density means a lack of sugar, and
Yeah.
of course the whole story is interrelated.
Yeah.
Some of the sugar feeds the organisms, so the higher you've got, the more healthy the soil life. So there's pre-existing things to be very easily part of a framework that allowed a very simple certification. Even something as simple as understanding that when you grow a crop, the single most important thing in management is called gas exchange. The single most important element for the health of the plant and the health of the microbes is not N, it's not P, it's not K, it's not calcium, it's oxygen.
Oxygen.
And having a soil friable enough, which involves two things, the calmate ratio, the fungal-bacteria ratio, both of which are really easy to measure, that allows oxygen to diffuse in, to be utilised by the organisms, the roots, and then to diffuse out of CO2 and drive the whole process, the most important process on the planet called photosynthesis.
Yep.
And that's measurable, easily ascertained, and you've got a poor calmate ratio, one-to-one, your soil's not breathing, you're not going to have a soil life, because they're all most of them are oxygen dependent. And so there's a whole bunch of simple ways we could do it rather than the current draconian model of have you got chemicals that haven't been? And the one last thing was, how close are we with this technology to being able to identify chemical residues on food, which strikes me as not that far away.
Yeah.
And that really is the game changer. And of course, the people that have tried to do that have been stomped on so heavily for the very fact that it is the game changer. Because you go into a pack with your phone, if it can be done on the phone with a spectrometer conceivably, and you measure the 11 chemicals in your packet of cornflakes you're feeding your child, and you put that on social media, and that makes a difference.
Yep.
It's a serious game changer.
I'll try to respond to the points you made. Foundationally, you and the elders in this broader community have figured out, have the answers, and have been singing from the mountaintops for decades about how to work with nature. The point is not do we know how to or not. The point is, how do we get more people to listen and act, right? I mean, I learned this stuff from you guys 20 years ago, and I've been going out around the world and, you know, I'm just repeating John Kemp, right? He's famous, right? All he did was what I did, which was go to the elders at Acres and learn and repeat, right? There's a bunch of us in my generation now that are, you know, have notoriety because people don't know any better, but we're on the shoulders of the giants who figured this thing out a long time ago. This wisdom is not new. It's been around forever. The question is, how do we bring it to scale? How do we implement it? You know, how do we incentivize people to pay attention and focus on that? And right now, a lot of farmers are sold a bill of goods by product salesmen who have a lot of money. And those of us who are operating on this other biological paradigm aren't so well resourced. You know, we don't have the capital, marketing, there's all these dynamics of culture which are impediments to the system. So yes, it's completely frustrating to me that all these things that we do know, that you guys know, you know, haven't been codified into an open, clear framework that is everybody's incentivized to listen to. How do we get the governments in Nairobi and, you know, I don't know, Addis Ababa to prioritize this instead of what Agra is telling them? Like, we have to consider the logistics, the structural logistics of culture, and how do we work with them systemically? To the point of farmers being old, you know, and profitability, whether the cost of production is higher or lower, my thought is, I think Carrie Reams said this, there's never been a surfeit of high quality produce in the market, right? There's never been tons of high quality food available. You know, how do you find it? How do you know it's there? How do you trust it? How do you differentiate? How do you decommoditize? What's the dynamic through which the general public can begin to decommoditize food and begin to preference the stuff that's better? And in the meantime, between now and when all food is better, you could logically argue that people who are doing a better job will be able to command premiums because people don't want their kids to die from cancer. If they knew that this was better and that was worse, and how about if farmers were able to go directly to consumer and not have to go through these wholesalers that are basically taking 95% of the retail dollar, right? What percent of the retail dollar goes to the farmer? Why does it have to go through this massive, you know, top-down, you know, profit-sucking corporate structure? Why can't we have a more, you know, even if you're operating on scale, there are models for direct-to-consumer sales. So we need to be, you know, implementing this whole system of mutual symbiotic empowerment. For me, the model is nature. The model is nature, which includes foundationally symbiosis and diversity, right? And cross-pollination. And if we go through this colonized top-down structure of big corporates, which are sucking the life force, like, we're screwed. That's the colonizing structure. As long as we're playing that game, we're not going to be succeeding. The shorter the supply chains, even if you're operating on scale, even if you're putting it in the mail, right? There are other models, but how do we incentivize the consumers to know to buy from you and not to buy from somebody else? How do we you know, disrupt this dynamic? These are the open questions. I think I covered most of your points. I'm not sure if I covered all of them. Oh, measurement, yes. So when it comes to spectroscopy, right? All this stuff can be measured in pieces of kit that sit on a bench top that cost $500,000. The logistics of putting that into a handheld meter, the logistics of putting that into a smartphone are effectively scale. So if you're measuring things in percent, like calcium may be present in 2% of the substance of the thing, well, we can measure percent pretty easily with a small spectrometer. Parts per million, Okay, we can talk about parts per million, 200 parts per million, 30 parts per million, whether it's zinc or whatever it is, polyphenols, amino acids. Okay, parts per million, definitely doable. Toxins are present generally in parts per billion. The logistics of putting a spectrometer in a phone that can measure parts per billion is actually a technical issue, right? Not saying it can't be done, but remember the old-fashioned DVD player? Remember that thing we used to have in the olden days? DVD players, remember? The first DVD player cost $10,000 because the logistics of making that laser, work right every time was really complex. By the time DVD players, got taken out by digital, they cost $10 brand new. Right, so it's a question of logistics of manufacture and supply chain and scale. And so it does seem to be entirely plausible that we'll be able to measure toxins at parts per billion concentration in small instrumentation like phones down the road, but we just have to understand it's a process. And we need to stimulate the market for spectrometers in the first place right now. Right now, there is no market for spectrometers. Nobody's holding a handheld, ray gun. I can't say ray gun without now thinking about the fact that I'm not supposed to say that in this country. Apparently there's a thing about ray guns in Australia. I like to call it a ray gun, actually. I think that's a cool term. But right now, no one has a thing in their hand which can measure reality and give them honest assessments of what's going on. Can you measure point source pollution? Can you measure toxins in the atmosphere? Can you measure lead in your children's toys? Can you imagine? Who remembers before we had smartphones? Anybody? Back before you had the supercomputer in your hand? Now that we've got supercomputers in our hands, our complete lives are transformed. Right? Almost all of culture is dramatically transformed because we now have supercomputers in our hands. No one yet has a ray gun in their hand to assess reality. But imagine in 5 or 10 years, if it was normative. If it was normative that we could see when the factories were emitting toxic gases, like when they were dumping things in the rivers. When the Chinese children's toys were painted in lead paint. If we could actually measure ourselves and we could use social to communicate and use reputation and word of mouth and honor to discern, the nature of reality, I think from a bottom-up perspective with a collective interest at heart, we have the power to change the world. The question is just a question of logistics and steps and process. So, and I hope that, one last thing I'd like to say, I don't think that we should have big farmers selling to people living in cities. I think we should have people living on land. I think we belong on land. I think we belong in relationship to land. I think we should be raising our children in relationship to land. I think the only viable future potential for humanity is when our children are raised in deep relationship with nature. And that will only happen if people are living on land. And the more they're living on land, the less we need to have big farms selling in the commodity system to people that are wage slaves living in those life force sucking structures called cities. I'm biased. But I think there's a deeper conversation here about the future of humanity and how we are living it. And a lot of these dynamics that we're struggling with come from the fact that we are in a profoundly colonized structure of culture. And we need to be deeply thinking about a lot of this other stuff. I don't want to go too far into that right now because it's not the agenda, but for what it's worth, I do have an agenda, and that is we belong in right relationship with nature. Anyway, yes. Who's got the spoon? I think he wants to talk again. Maybe we just keep moving it around the circle. Moving along. How much time do we have, theoretically?
12:40.
20 minutes, okay.
Just a quick one to pick up on your health thing. Australia recently there was a report of a spike in cancer in the 20s, 30s and 40s cohort.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think we need to pay attention to be ready for, in those cohorts, there'll be some young, highly educated, highly intelligent, highly resourced people who will start to pay attention, and they're the people we need to be ready to meet.
Yeah, I think the reality is, it's called epigenetics. You know this epigenetics thing, right? Like if your grandmother was exposed to toxins and didn't have an optimal nutrient caliber, and then your mother was born and she wasn't quite as vibrant and vital because of that, and then you were born, right? You are epigenetically weaker. Like we are degrading. There's this whole thing called evolution. People have heard about evolution. There's devolution also. You evolve to keep modulating and staying in harmony with nature and flourishing, and when you devolve, nature prevents you from reproducing, you die out. As far as I'm concerned, we are in an existential moment right now with a lot of systemic devolution occurring. You go through 2 or 3 generations or 4 generations of insufficient fodder, and you struggle with the logistics of actually having the next generation occur. Most people don't want to die. Unfortunately, that's what we're facing with people that are young, especially in the US. I can tell you so many people I know that are in their teens and 20s and 30s have siblings, people in their grades who have died, right? Like, this is not appropriate, normal, natural, healthy. They're struggling from visceral, physiological dysfunction themselves. It is epidemic. That's what we're dealing with. It's life or death. It's visceral. And that, perversely, is the opportunity. That's the opportunity, because it's so visceral, because we all have such a desire to flourish. And this is central to so many things. I think that's what's going to move this thing forward, is that visceral, like I said, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, survival attribute. Over here, yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I am very inspired by the design of this system version. And I just wanted to share some experience from my work working in the equal movement, which
Yes.
is a similar sort of theory of change, and just share a couple of points which hopefully help. But,
Please.
from my experience, it was really critical for the standards to be really robust.
Yeah.
In order to build trust and maintain the reputation.
Yeah.
And the process also in a robust process, and underneath both of those is accountability and transparency, and I think this open source of dialogue is not exactly. But another challenge in the eco space is making sure that it was applicable to different regions around the world, and I just had some questions around the methodology of next phase of developing the baseline. So I know that you tested in the cattle space in America predominantly, but looking at baselines regionally around the world, is that factored into this next phase?
Yeah.
Appendix A, we've got regions of importance based on the importance of that within the region, but I don't have the technical expertise to understand whether there will be much variation across a baseline in Australia versus the US.
Yeah.
And if carrot producers in Australia are measuring the quality of their product against the baseline in the US, is that fair?
So it is in the text. The plan is to, for every crop we assess, be sampling relatively evenly from all 6 continents that humans live on and grow food on. So categorically, this is not designed to be a North America or North America and Europe or North America and Europe and Australia kind of protocol. This is Asia's here, Africa's here, South America's here, all evenly distributed. We've got the proposed 20 crops we would be looking at, and they're staple crops. You know, there's a few fruits and vegetables there because we want to get that diversity, but primarily we're looking at staple crops and looking at the globe as a context. Yeah, I think I addressed it. Yeah, and this listening session process, we're going from here to Europe to North America to South America to Africa. And so we're really trying to go to these parts of the world where people have entirely different constraints and concerns and struggles, et cetera, and integrate them all into this framework. That's foundational. But to the end point perspective, we want to define 1 to 100 for carrots for the planet. We want to find the best carrot in the planet, the worst carrot in the planet, and consider this thing to be a planetary process. As we have been small and limited in our capacity, we have oversampled for North America. We certainly have gotten a bunch of the different geographic dynamics in North America, so we can say that might be somewhat representative, but foundationally this objective is to be done as a global endeavor. Yeah, absolutely, categorically, and I think foundationally, yes.
First of all, thanks, I'm of the conviction that animal welfare is measurable.
Yeah.
It actually determines the nutrient density.
Yeah.
I would suggest you do some animal welfare measurements on like when you're trying to determine what's like your animal products determines.
Absolutely, animal welfare. I say plant welfare personally. I'm not sure why people are biased towards animals and don't consider plants as sentient beings who have pain and suffering and struggle. But when we did beef, a number of the compounds we assessed in the meat directly connect to stress hormones and other, what's it called? Endocrine system imbalances and all the sort of hormonal imbalances, like actual health symptoms. Like if you were to measure a human, you'd be looking for these metrics and say, this means this animal is well, this animal's not well. We looked at that exactly that for the beef. The microbiome as well is a great way to look at overall well-being. So foundationally, that was part of the biochemistry and the microbiome we're looking for. And I will say, we're not just looking for health beneficial nutrients, we're looking for health detrimental nutrients as well. Stress hormones are detrimental for you. They're bad for the animal, they're bad for you to be eating. And we want to have a balance when we have this holistic definition of quality and nutrient density to integrate those dynamics. People know about aluminum, right? Aluminum, right? High levels of aluminum in weathered soils, like high levels of aluminum and cadmium and stuff in our fresh fruits and vegetables. We don't want to talk about the level of those nutrients that are in our foods, but in many cases, and especially when you're using chemistry on weathered soils, you have very high levels of elements which are not good for you. So we need to be looking at this from a holistic perspective and understand how the plants try to compensate, but in many cases, there's things we're taking in which are actually categorically detrimental to us, which are not toxins, which are these other elements, et cetera. So, but again, I've been doing my best to tease out wisdom from as many places as I can. This will succeed the more people show up, offer their insight, put their shoulder to the wheel. I got so many people who are like, go Dan, go Dan. I'm like, that's not the point. The point is not go Dan. The point is who wants to show up and help out and put their shoulder to the wheel, and how can we do this collectively? That is what will determine the overall systemic success of this endeavor. Yeah.
Thanks. Just brought up a quick thought that it'll be interesting to see if there are any things that are any negatives to the score, like the amounts of this compound that we've reduced.
Yeah.
But not my question. So, you're doing it very responsibly, sort of trying to exclude the corrupting influences of capitalism as much as you can model. If we can get it sort of scaled, if you can get real commercial funding behind it, you've got devices all over the place. Every scan that people make in every shop all around the world, that data could be collected.
Yep.
And then go towards your calibrations, and that you could make sure they're scanning a barcode before they then scan the product.
Yep.
And which would give you a lot of data to then correlate.
So 100% for the consumer, but there's all sorts of other instrumentation in field, on farm, in packing house, et cetera, there's this opportunity. I mean, I'm not sure how people feel about big data and AI and IoT sensors and things like that, but it is reality that we have all this stuff happening. My thought is, if we can get people to engage in an open and collaborative process whereby we begin to establish data collection and share openly, we can extraordinarily rapidly dial in the nuances of what causes ecosystems to be optimized in their system function, and that can be freely available to all people on all continents, right? We have the opportunity through sharing, through engaging in symbiosis, through understanding that we're all in this together, to integrate the tech, to integrate the hardware, to integrate the data, to integrate the software, to integrate the AI into a profound, rapid transformation of the way we engage this planet. It is absolutely at our fingertips. All the tools are there. We simply need to put them together into a structure that is predicated on the principles of life, which is foundationally symbiosis, right? Open, transformative, symbiotic dynamics. Who's heard of quorum sensing? Anybody heard of quorum sensing? Right, this concept where you get enough of the different, people in the community to find each other and realize that they actually benefit by working together. Instead of being pathogenic, they all of a sudden transform into symbiotic. Anybody ever been in a relationship with a person who's pathogenic, but when they get surrounded by enough symbiotic people, they shift and they start being friendly and helpful? Anybody ever had that experience? That's functionally quorum sensing, right? These big corporates don't have to be bad. Government doesn't have to be bad. Industry doesn't have to be bad. If we establish a dynamic where the incentives are shifted, all of a sudden these structures can be beneficial structures. For me, that's an amazing opportunity. I do want to take this opportunity, I think we're close to the end, to do something, which is to take it from the future to the present. And I like to say, it's all great and well and good to have grand visions of the future, but the question is the moment, and what are you doing in the moment? And to that end, at the BFA, we are doing something which is, creating a dynamic for this to begin to be done right now. And it is with this very old-fashioned tool called a refractometer, which is very good, very powerful, very simple, very inexpensive. What we're doing is we're building an app for people to effectively, when you bring home your shopping, take a refractometer, get your garlic press out, take a chunk, squish it, get the chocolate juice on there, get the reading, and upload it. On this day, I purchased this crop with this branding, and it got this reading. Boom, here it is in the public. If you have 5 friends or 5 people who you want to invite over for a bottle of wine on Saturday afternoon, bring your shopping. We can all open up bring a carrot, bring a cucumber, bring a zucchini, bring a tomato, bring your milk, get those readings, hang out, have a bottle of wine, shoot the shit, upload it. Together, we the people can, in the very near future, begin to establish baselines where we, normalize this process of discerning what is where. We don't need to wait for the high-tech version. We have this thing, which is, I think it's 195 years old. There's no battery. They cost $10 brand new, etc. So to that end, I've got, this is the Brixit kit that we've been building. So we're not only building an app, we're sort of branding a refractometer and a garlic press. So it's quite simple. I don't have all the labels here, printed on it yet. This is the little chart, and this thing we take and we put a little sticker on it, and the garlic press we take this piece of cardboard out and put our own piece of cardboard in. There's a little manual. We got these little coins, which says Brixit Challenge on it, and that goes into the garlic press so you don't get the pulp coming out. But this I want to give to Susan, who's our country leader here and has helped out so much in so many ways. A very powerful, beautiful, loving person.
I'll be a danger in the supermarkets or at the market.
So thank you very much, Susan.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We will hope to be publicly releasing these next month. with the app will be done, and we'll have a webinar and talk about it. And there's going to be a barrier to entry, which is you have to be a BFA member. Anybody, of course, can use a Reflect timer anywhere, but also anybody can put in false data. So we, the basic baseline of like, how do we, have some integrity around who you are and we can trust your data is you have to be a member, which costs $5 a month, which is not that high of a bar. But yeah, 10 people in a city can begin to establish a baseline, which can normalize this whole thing and begin to share it all globally. So I think we're about out of time. 3 minutes. Does anybody have any final insights? Martin, on to you. Yes.
Martin here from Breaking with the Spoon.
Yes.
I've talked to the spoon. Great stuff I'm in. I'm thinking survival stars and things like that across food to help people get there. One thing that I've noticed of late is eggs. People are prepared to pay $12 for a bunch of eggs. And
Eggs, yes.
From $4 to $12
Yeah.
for eggs.
Yep.
So people are happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get them to do that for carrots and all those
Yep.
things. But I think eggs have got a great opportunity to put in your star rating in there and put in why this is important and get that as a medium of educating the general public.
I think we have examples, lots of examples, where people obviously are willing to pay an extreme premium for things they think are better. There's people who can say that they don't and they're never going to, et cetera, but you saw the number of samples that are excellent, right? Hardly any. If we begin to have that identified, where is the excellent samples? My presumption is that those people who are producing those crops of a higher nutritional caliber are going to be able to command whatever price they want. At least a price that will provide them the ability to have an honest living. But yeah, that's all beyond our capacity to control.
I heard yesterday in America they're already on egg squat, omega-3, omega-6, and things like that. Is that true?
There's all kinds of claim package about how much omega-3 they have and what the ratios are and what they do claim and don't claim. The marketing is really sophisticated, right? As with all cases, you can say omega-3 rich. Well, that's a technical term that the USDA controls, which means it's above someone's parts per million, and all you have to do is add a little bit of flaxseed to their meal, and all of a sudden it can be categorized as such. What we're looking for is a really comprehensive and systemic 1 to 100 definition, which is based on human health effects, not marketing, not labeling, not certifications. I don't think labeling and marketing and certifications are a structure of nature. I think they're a structure of colonized, bureaucratic, binary, separation mentality. So it's perhaps a deeper conversation, but yeah.
Well, that in fact what Hamish was talking about is every now and then you've got to go through a whole spectrum of other tests.
Yeah.
To check people are not functioning by giving flaxseed.
And let's do that openly, and let's have the capacity to perceive in everyone's hand, so they don't have to trust a bureaucratic power they have no control over. They have the ability to perceive directly in their hand, or they can develop their own subtle senses of sight and taste. In the olden days, right, grandmothers could pick something up and feel it. Anybody ever develop that faculty in their hand to be able to sense subtly? Some people know what I'm talking about. We are wired with the ability to perceive profoundly deeply. Right? The whole game here is to remind us how profound we are and to support us in activating and deepening those senses, and ideally having our children and our grandchildren not have those senses beat out of them by a perverse colonized framework, but supported because of that's who their nature is in being who they truly are. I think that's the end game we're aiming for.
You think we should have 4-year-olds in the supermarkets that have got that connection running around and you go, what's his carrot like? And they go, no.
Mm-hmm. I don't think 4-year-olds should be in supermarkets, but yes, absolutely. I mean, we are all wired with multidimensional, profound capacities, is my understanding.
12 years in boarding school kills
What's that?
12 years in boarding school killed that.
It's an indoctrination framework, right? It's a colonizing structure. All these structures of culture are designed to make cogs in the industrial wheel. They're not designed to facilitate profound beings. I think indigenous cultures have models we need to be humbly learning from and reorienting our culture towards, or we will, devolve. So we're in the midst of it right now. It's up to us. It's great. It's totally exciting. Thank you all for your time. Hope you had a good time. Your engagement is what will or will not make this whole thing succeed. To the degree you do, to the degree you share with others, it is a bottom-up, it is a grassroots, it is a word-of-mouth dynamic. No pressure. But yeah, here's Susan.
In putting the event together, we've created a list of emails, which we'd like to keep you updated with. And there's a few people here today that didn't sort of come through the RSVP process. So if you can send your email, I'll put you on the list.
Or if you don't want to be associated.
Or if you don't want to be, no worry.
All right. Thank you all. And there's snacks over there and tea and things as well. Thank you to the farm for hosting. I'm sorry I didn't say. Thank you for watching Wonderful Host. Yes.